Hey everyone, this is Marcus Kane, and today I want to tell you a story about a person who reached a point where nothing was left except a choice. Because sometimes life doesn't break you all at once. It does it slowly, step by step, until one day you realize that if you don't start acting now, this will be your life forever. Listen carefully.
My name is Michael, and this is not a story about how everything worked out. This is a story about how many times it didn't, how many nights I sat alone questioning myself, and how close I came to stopping without anyone ever knowing. I remember that day like it never really ended because I was walking down the street with exactly $7 in my pocket. And it wasn't just about the money, it was about what that number represented, because when you have nothing else, you start realizing how fragile everything really is. I kept walking without direction, not because I had somewhere to go, but because stopping felt worse, because the moment you stop, your thoughts catch up, and they don't just appear once, they repeat, over and over again, telling you that you're behind, that you failed, that maybe this is all your life is ever going to be. And that's when I saw that small fast food place, nothing special, just warm light behind the glass. But in that moment it felt like something more, like a test, like if I walked in, something would change, even though I already knew I didn't have enough money. I opened the door, stepped inside, and the smell of food hit me instantly, warm, heavy, real, and in that moment it wasn't just hunger, it was awareness of how far I had drifted from a life where something like this doesn't require thought. I stood in line, watching people ahead of me order without hesitation, laughing, scrolling through their phones, completely relaxed, and I realized I was physically there but mentally somewhere else, because the only thing in my head was whether I could afford even the cheapest thing on that menu. When it was my turn, I looked up slowly, pretending I had options, pretending I could choose, but I already knew the truth, and when I asked for the cheapest item and heard the price, something inside me dropped, because even that was out of reach. I stood there for a few seconds that felt longer than they should have, then quietly said I'd think about it, turned around, and walked out, and when the door closed behind me, it wasn't embarrassment that hit me, it was something heavier, something that forced me to see where I actually was. I sat on the curb, took out my wallet, looked at those $7, and for the first time I didn't try to explain it away, I didn't try to lie to myself, I just saw the truth. And then the thought came. What if I just stop? Not dramatic, not emotional, just quiet, logical, almost peaceful. And that's the most dangerous moment, because that's how people quit, not loudly, but silently. But then another thought followed, sharper, colder, harder to ignore, that if I accept this now, nothing will ever change, and that thought scared me more than anything else. So I made a decision, not because I felt ready, not because I felt confident, but because I didn't want this to be my life. The next day nothing changed on the outside, I was still tired, still uncertain, still lost, but I had made a decision, and I went to find a job, any job, because I understood that I didn't need clarity yet, I needed stability, something I could stand on. I got hired for basic work, repetitive and exhausting, where every day felt the same, where time moved slowly, and where the only thing you gained was fatigue and a small paycheck, but that paycheck became the first step out of where I was. I started saving, slowly, carefully, sometimes choosing discomfort just to keep a little more aside, and while it didn't look impressive, it felt different inside, because I was no longer completely stuck. After a few months, I had enough to try again, and I remember sitting late at night, staring at that small amount of money, knowing that this decision mattered more than it should, because it was never just about the money, it was about whether I believed I could change anything at all. I took the risk. I tried reselling, thinking it would be simple, but reality doesn't follow simple logic, because while people showed interest, while messages came in, every deal seemed to fall apart at the last second, creating a cycle that became familiar, hope building up slowly and then collapsing instantly. I adjusted prices, changed strategies, tried to stay optimistic, but eventually I had to face the numbers, and the numbers didn't lie, I wasn't just not winning, I was losing. So I went back to work, saved again, tried again, and this cycle didn't happen once, it repeated, over and over, until it stopped feeling temporary and started feeling like a test of how long I could keep going without seeing real results. One evening, sitting on a bus after a long shift, barely paying attention, I overheard a conversation, just fragments at first, until one sentence stood out clearly enough to pull me back. "You're not selling a product, you're selling a solution." And I don't know why that moment mattered so much, but it did, because something shifted, something small but important, and I started thinking differently, not about what I was offering, but why someone would actually need it. And slowly, almost quietly, things began to change, not fast, not dramatically, but consistently enough to notice, and for the first time I didn't fall back to zero, and that alone felt like progress. But then I made another mistake, because as soon as I felt a little stability, I rushed it, I pushed harder, invested more, tried to grow faster than I was ready for. And for a short period of time it looked like it was working, numbers increased, movement accelerated, and I convinced myself that I had finally figured it out. And then it collapsed, not instantly, but piece by piece, through small mistakes, delays, missed details, until everything started stacking against me again. And this time it felt heavier, because there was more to lose. I remember sitting late at night, staring at the numbers, realizing I was now dealing with debt, not just loss, and feeling a kind of pressure that doesn't let you ignore it, because it follows you into every thought. I picked up the phone, called someone I trusted, and for a moment I couldn't even speak, because saying it out loud would make it real, but eventually I said it. "I think I ruined everything." And the answer came back calm, almost too calm. "You didn't ruin everything. You're just not done yet." And that changed something again. I stopped rushing, stopped reacting emotionally, started fixing things slowly, cutting unnecessary risks, focusing on what actually worked instead of what felt exciting, and this period, as heavy as it was, became the foundation for everything that came next. One night, after months of that process, I saw something different, numbers that didn't look like the past, numbers that felt real, and I checked them again and again and again, not because I was excited but because I didn't trust it yet. And when it finally settled in, I didn't celebrate, I just leaned back and felt silence, not emptiness, but relief, the kind that comes when pressure finally lifts. Because in that moment I knew it worked. Not perfectly, not magically, but it worked. Over time, it became a system, something stable, something real, something that didn't depend on luck anymore, something that brought not just money, but freedom, and more importantly, meaning, because I knew exactly what it took to build it. And sometimes, when I pass places like that small fast food spot, I don't think about the food anymore. I think about that moment, because it was never about hunger. It was about the decision I made when I had every reason to stop. And if you're listening to this right now, understand this clearly. At some point, you will face your own version of that moment, your own version of those $7, your own version of that quiet question asking if you should stop. And what you do in that moment will decide everything that comes after. Because this path doesn't break people who struggle. It breaks people who stop. And the ones who keep going, even when it doesn't make sense, even when it feels pointless, even when there's no proof it will work, are the ones who change. And maybe right now, you're closer than you think. You just don't see it yet. But you will. If you don't stop.